In this video, we will learn about if, else statements in C++. These programming constructs allow us to write branching code that will execute a different set of instructions based on the value of one or more conditions. We'll start out looking at an if statement and then build on that example. Let's create a Boolean variable named condition, which we assign a value of true. To use an if statement, we type the word if, then put the condition we want to check in parentheses. A pair of curly braces comes next, and inside of here goes what we call the body of the if statement, the code that we want to be run if the condition for the if statement evaluates to true. Let's output the string condition was true to the console. When we run the code, notice that condition was true was output to the console. This makes sense since the condition variable we are checking with the if statement does have a value of true. Let's change the condition to false and then run the code again. Notice that nothing was output to the console this time. Since the condition we are checking for the if statement is false, the code inside of the body of that if statement was not run. An if statement can be paired with something called an else statement, which will execute in the event that the if statement above it evaluates to false. Let's add an else statement below the if statement that we currently have in our code, and inside of the body of the else statement we will output condition was false to the console. When we run the code, notice that condition was false was output to the console. Next, we will create an integer variable named x and assign it a value of 4. Along with if and else statements, there is another type of statement called else if. An else if statement comes after an if statement but before the else statement, and is used to check an alternative condition. For example, let's create an else if statement that checks if our variable x is holding a value of 4. If that is the case, we will output x is 4 to the console. When we run the code, notice that x is 4 was output to the console. One important thing to note here is that the code inside of the else statement was not executed. Out of the if, else code block, only one of the statements will be executed, whichever one comes first and whose condition evaluates to true. If we change the condition to be if x does not equal 4 and then run the code again, notice that the code inside of the else statement was executed, since both the if and else if statements were not hit, since their conditions evaluated to false, leaving the else statement code to be executed. One thing I want to make clear is that you can have multiple else if statements tied to the same code block. Up at the top of the code we will include the string header file so that we can utilize the string class for this next example. For example, let's create a variable of type string named s and assign it a value of the string abc. Then we will add another else if statement that checks if s is equal to the string value abc. Inside of here we will output s equals abc to the console. One callout I want to make is since we are nesting double quotes inside of a string, we need to prefix the inner double quotes with backslashes, the escape character that we learned about in the last section. When we run the code, notice that s equals abc was output to the console, thanks to this new else if statement that we added. Since the conditions of the if and else if statements above it evaluate to false, and the condition of this else if statement evaluates to true, its body of code is run.